Hello, and welcome back to the Tavern. In this video, I'm going to discuss what it means to me to be a master of the game. Now, to me, being a master of the game means taking time to make interesting plot hooks or threads for your players to become entangled in, all the while weaving fun but meaningful encounters into those threads. Being a master of the game to me also means you kind of need to be able to think on your feet. And this is because players will inevitably, do something. And they have their own wills, their own goals. They're inevitably going to do something that you just cannot prepare for. So therefore you kind of need to be able to improvise. Now, my definition of game mastery is not memorizing every word of a game engine by chapter and verse. A master of the game should know the core mechanics thoroughly. However, they only need to know enough of the core rules to keep a game moving. Remember, don't memorize the whole book, just what you need to. Now, when a problem arises or an argument ensues over a specific wording of a rule, you as the game master should make a ruling and keep the game moving. However, note what the rule was being argued about, note what you said the rule should be, and then come back to it after the game has ended or over a long pause, and then read up on it. However, master of the game should also not hold so stringently the rules that it restricts innovation or imaginative play of players. This can result in the game becoming very unfun for some players, or even all the players, if they keep getting told, no, you can't do that because the rules say so. Yet, you should still have a firm enough understanding of the core engine's mechanics to be able to facilitate your players' growth, engagement within the game. That all said, be aware that you will inevitably run across a player who's going to attempt to bend the rules to their favor. And this will be by committing to memory every book within a game engine, even books you probably don't even own. Also that, they will inevitably attempt to rules lawyer their way into becoming an untouchable machine of absolute destruction, mayhem, and wanton destruction. And their whole focus will be just, to be a mechanic. And just their character is a game mechanic, and that's it. They're not there for adventure. They're not there for, to roleplay. They're just there to be a mechanical thing. And that might sound extreme to you, but trust me, I've had my share of those kinds of players. To that end, however, I believe a game master should kind of figure out what kind of players they want at their table well in advance of playing or starting a game. Do you want new players, fresh to the hobby, never rolled the multi-polyhedrals? Do you want veterans who have played, a number of games and have a firm grasp of those rules? Or do you want the keepers of ancient knowledge, wisdom, who have spent more time at the table than away? The choice is up to you as to who you want at your table. However, once the master of the game has assembled the players and everyone has convened at the table, be it virtual or physical, you're ready for your first official session. Now, some might call this session 0, some might just call it session 1, whatever. As a master of the game, it's your job to inform your players during this first session as to the game's main theme, not the plot that you've constructed in your mind, just the main elements. This is called setting the theme or tone. And once this theme has been set, you should give a description of the starting area, any major NPCs that they might know or run into, and anything the players should know about the game world. Now, after you've done that, you should probably go around the table. Now, this is my thoughts. You should go around the table and gather ideas from your players about what they want to accomplish with these characters that they've made. Now, be sure to answer any questions about the game world and make recommendations as necessary. However, do not be afraid to tell a player that their concept may not fit within the theme of the game. But don't necessarily reject the player's ideas completely out of hand. If it's the only thing they're coming up with, work with them. But if a player, let's say a player wants to play a rich playboy nobleman during the day, and they want to hunt criminals by night. But the main theme of the game is, let's say, in the Bronze Era. Well, that's where you kind of remind them, hey, I don't think the House of Wayne is going to be a good fit for the Bronze Era. Communities were far smaller back then. And the grand metropolises, while they did exist, they weren't near as big as what you're thinking. And most people in the smaller communities knew of everyone in there. Conversely, however, you might have players who are struggling to conceptualize a character for the game. And in this instance, a game master should offer a thematically appropriate set of options. Kind of narrow and limit what options they might, want to do. Specifically, these options, should encourage the players to role play or explore the world. Those options should really be available to them. Now, in my opinion, a master of the game should also be taking copious amounts of notes of what each player's goal is, and then using those notes to begin to plot out other grander plot hooks for those specific players into a grander web for the campaign. You have your idea of where the game's going. They have their idea where the game's going. Marry the two together. This will allow players to explore the world you have created and pick up clues about events that are somehow linked to one another, including to them. This will help drive a narrative of some kind of the group's making, really. Now, remember, for the players, it should be about the journey, not the destination. Yes, I do read Brandon Sanderson novels. My favorite is the Stormlight Archive, obviously. But those words of the Radiance are also really great advice for game masters, and for players to take to heart. So, next question should be, where does one start along the path of mastering the game? Well, to me, it starts with reading. Lots of reading. Remember, as I said earlier, a master of the game should know enough of the core rules, but also the core mechanics of a game to be able to run said game. And there are a lot of game engines out there. There's so many. And more are being added all the time. Now, you could start with one of the most talked about and popular game engines, Dungeons and Dragons, whose 5th edition rule set is fairly easily accessible. There's actually websites that have the core game mechanics available to you. And there's a lot of, or a large number of community creators, and people who are following the content on the web that might give better or in-depth explanations of the core rules. Another great choice might be Index Card RPG. This rules light game will get you running and playing the game in just 34 pages of the Quickstart guide. Now, and that's free on DriveThru. Now, as you become more comfortable with mastering the game, you should branch out to other game engines, ones completely different from D20. Ones with weird or odd dice systems that you're just not familiar with, such as, World of Darkness from White Wolf, or even their Exalted series of games, where it's a pool of D10s, or the Genesis narrative dice system from Fantasy Flight. whatever, game engine you want to run or experience. The realm of your imagination is kind of your playground, and the game engine rules kind of help give shape and help, the shape the limitless potential there. Now, the next question might be, well, what kind of game should I run? Well, that's kind of up to you as the master of your own game to decide. But if you need inspiration, I'm going to say, well, you guessed it, more reading, or maybe even playing some, classic RPG video games. I mean, one of my personal favorites was the SNES classic Chrono Trigger. I borrowed from that, loads of inspiration over the years, especially the Flying Kingdom. While not the only source for a flying kingdom or a flying city, it was the most poignant one for me growing up as a youth playing that game. It had such an impact on me, having a flying landmass. Amazing to me. So if you want to run, let's say, a superhero game, brush up on your superhero films or your comic books of choice. How about sending your players off on a swashbuckling adventure in the Caribbean? Sci-fi on the mind? Might I recommend sending your players to the world of, altered carbon or dark matter? However, make sure they mind their stacks if they decide to play an altered carbon. Just remember, for new game masters, your first few games are probably going to be a bit rough. It's a hard start. Don't get discouraged. Keep at it. Keep dreaming about the next adventure you and your friends are going to have. Learning takes time and effort. Learning to do something well, that takes commitment. Now, that's about enough out of me on this topic. Be it a low-level adventure or a grand epic, as long as good times are to be had, this tavern will be open.